Good evening, everyone. It's Gordon Causey and Candy, the Wonder Pup. Although she's not a puppy anymore, she's 3 years old. Our Corona dog. Should have named her Corona or COVID. Got her on, I think it was March 18th of 2020, just when the insanity started. We picked her out from a breeder. I've got her mandatory treat. Hopefully, this will keep her reasonably placated. Here you go. There you go. Yeah. Shake. Good girl. Come on. There you go. Hopefully that'll keep her quiet, or at least reasonably calm while I try and do this video. Again, Gordon Causey, Gordy Canuck, grow a set, pick your moniker. If you're watching this on Twitter, if you click on it, and go to YouTube directly, you can chat, which I really appreciate. I enjoy engagement, just a simple hi. And of course, you're welcome to give me my little dopamine rush, subscribe, share, whatever. If I wanted to keep my thoughts to myself, I wouldn't be doing a YouTube video, obviously. So with all that out of the way, just in case I go down some talking about the jabs or COVID, I'll put the disclaimer out there that nothing in this video is intended in any way to be construed as medical advice, and I am not an expert in any medical field. So fact check, verify everything. These are just one man's thoughts, views, and opinions. So hopefully that keeps the community standards people happy. The pink-haired fact checkers with their PhDs in gender studies, as I like to say. What's in the news? If you haven't been paying attention to the news over the past couple days, then you might have missed it. But there have been two unidentified flying objects that have been shot down within the last 2 days. I think one was Friday at 1:45 p.m. and then another one just today, Saturday. It's now technically Sunday, the 12th of February. An unidentified flying object was shot down by, I think, F-35s. Kieran is saying, I hope it's not missiles. Either way, it's war. Well, the first one was over Alaska at 40,000 feet. Apparently NORAD, I believe it was NORAD, became aware of an unidentified flying object at around 40,000 feet. And it was F-35s were scrambled and apparently made visual contact with what was described as an unmanned, unidentified flying object. And it was determined that it should be shot down. And apparently it's being said that sleepy Joe Biden gave the order. I wonder if he could get through the sentence. And then just Saturday, another unidentified flying object was identified over the Yukon Territory. So that borders Alaska. And Trudeau is saying that he gave the order for it to be shot down, but it wasn't shot down by Canadian military. It was shot down by American F-20 and F-22, apparently took it out. And I'm seeing this one described as a weather balloon similar to the one that was shot down over one of the Carolinas, either South or North Carolina, just last week. And I think there's a danger here. How significant is this news? Could it be another nothing burger? It's hard to say. But I think it's worthwhile at least keeping something of an eye on it, because if you're like me and if you view this as being all part and parcel of a much larger agenda, and if you believe that the agenda is centered on depopulation, which I do, um, it's a war. It's a psychological war. And it's said that at times of war, an old saying from going way, way back, probably hundreds of years, is that during times of war, you should believe half of what you read and nothing of what you hear. And in our digital age, I'd almost want to extend that and say, believe nothing that you see. There's AI, artificial intelligence. There's technology that's sometimes referred to as deep fake technology. You may have seen a recent example of it being shared on Twitter and other social media platforms where someone has taken a video, what looks to be Joe Biden saying some very un-Joe Biden-like things about gender and about how you're a man or you're a woman and suck it up, buttercup, because you don't get to change. Something obviously Joe Biden and the woke leftist crowd would never say. I imagine if they can do that with Joe Biden. I saw a much earlier one with Obama from years ago. It wasn't as good. This one with Joe Biden, you could actually believe it. If it wasn't for the content of what he was saying, you could actually believe it was coming from his own mouth. I've got Kieran saying, I did notice a few days ago, I'm assuming AUS means Australia, ABC asked if aliens were real, but it's properly Starlink sending the Terminator back to protect Elon. Oh, good line, Kieran. For what it's worth, myself personally, I do not believe in aliens. There's a principle in science called Occam's razor, which says that the most logical conclusion is likely the right one. And I believe that the reason we've never found definitive proof of intelligent life elsewhere in the universe is because we are it. That stems from my Christian faith. We are the pinnacle. We are the center of creation. Not going to get into, I know we're revolving around the sun and the galaxy is spinning and all this other stuff, but I don't believe that there's anything else out there besides us. Although I like the line that says the most compelling evidence of the fact that there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe is the fact that they have not tried to contact human beings here on Earth. It's a good line. But the three main drivers of population control historically have been three things: war, disease, famine. And we're seeing two of those play out majorly right now. I believe it's the World Bank has just estimated that within the last few weeks, within the last month or two, that an additional 350 million people on the planet Earth have been pushed into what they're referring to as food insecurity. Another 350 million people, many of them children, starving to death. And of course, we've seen what's happened with COVID, and we're seeing rises in excess mortality over the last year or so, significant increases. You can deem whatever cause you want. And now this news about these, I have to worry, I have to wonder, I have to speculate on what they might, if this news does develop into something significant, are the Chinese going to be blamed? They were blamed for the balloon over the Carolinas. Well, I think it flew right over the United States, right over Montana, the Dakotas, and they say that they didn't shoot it down earlier because they were afraid it would land in a populated area or something to that effect. And so they shot it down over the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere off the coast of either North or South Carolina. And from what I have read, but again, remember, believe half of what you read and nothing of what you hear. But what they are saying is that the Chinese are asking for their property back, and they're saying that it was a scientific, a meteorological device, balloon collecting climate data maybe, or whatever. I have Dav or Dave 999. Remember when Ronald Reagan said, "I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world." Goodness knows what could happen. But the biggest thing is, in a psychological operation, the biggest enemy is fear. And we saw in the start of March of 20, and we saw it at the start of March 2020, and even a little before that, the effort by media, by government, to drive fear into the population. And fear is a virus in of itself because it robs a person's capacity for higher thought process. It robs a person of critical thinking capacity. And so could this morph into something that's used to drive fear? Because when you have fear, people are distracted. And I've talked enough in my previous videos about, so-called smart cities. And I finally wrote down what the full acronym stands for. It's surveillance, monitoring, analysis, reporting, technology. And they're already setting this up in Oxford, England, where they're putting up bullards. Bullards are those typically yellow type things, and they're going to be installed with 5G technology to monitor people's movements, surveillance and monitoring of people's movements, with only so many trips allowed outside of your designated zone. And then beyond that, everyone having a digital ID. So every time you travel outside your zone, it would be tracked, and then you could be taxed or fined or whatever. You're outside your zone. You've gone too many times outside your zone. You're not allowed. Spare your papers. This is the type of world I believe is envisioned in the coming years. It's called UN Agenda 2030 for a reason. And, I look upon it as being 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 4 steps forward, 2 steps back, creep, 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 moving us closer and closer to basically an Orwellian system where a human population, the vast majority of us, are little more than digital ID, digital property of our corporate masters, with government just there to basically hold our leash. And it's dystopian, it's Orwellian, it's authoritarian on steroids, and that's what I see the agenda. That's where I see them taking us, or trying to take us. And I'm convinced they're all in. I'm convinced they're 100% all in. I don't know if Kieran, I don't know Dave, if you're in Canada, what part of the world you're in, but you'll likely know about, if you're watching my video, you'll likely know about the Ottawa convoy. And a lot of people like to think, we won, we finally got them to back down. I tend to look upon that as, at best, a strategic retreat. They pulled back their forces, and they're planning their next move. I think they are all in on this agenda. They have tried to scare us for generations, going back to when I was in public school, trying to scare us into the climate emergency, global warming, climate change, and all this stuff. And it just doesn't work. And I think that's because people are, number one, it's not a freight train coming at you. So, COVID, they presented that as a freight train that was going to, everyone's going to die. Whereas climate changes. People know this. And I bring it up all the time when I'm in conversations with people if they bring up anything about climate change. And I say, of course, climate changes. And then I bring up the fact that around the year 950, I've since gone and rechecked my data, rechecked my facts on it. A period referred to as the medieval warming period started in and around the year 950, and it ran until about the year 1300. And during that time, a significant event happened. The Vikings were able to settle Greenland. That's why they named it Greenland, or the Viking equivalent. I don't speak Norse, but that's where we get the name Greenland from in English. It's because the Vikings identified it as a green land. The ice sheets had pulled back to such a significant degree that the Vikings were able to establish thriving settlements, colonies, whatever. And those settlements thrived for 200 to 300 years because of global warming. Naturally occurring cyclical global warming. It happens. And then I jokingly like to say that the Vikings realized that they were destroying the planet because of their plastic bags and stopped using them. Obviously not. We went after that period, that medieval warming period. Climatologists refer to the following period as the Little Ice Age. And the Little Ice Age ran from about 1300 and right up into the early 1800s, so for about 400 or 500 years. And this is cyclical. We have these warming periods, cooling periods. And you ask people what the percentage of the Earth's atmosphere is made up of carbon, and they're not even aware. But ask people. And if you don't know yourself, check it out. And people will say 5%, 20%, 30%. It's a trace element. It's 0.2. It's incredibly small. It's like 0.2% of the atmosphere. Again, not an expert, verify that. I might be off by a tenth of a percentage point or two, but it's less than 1%. And this is the big bad boogeyman. And when climatologists, climate scientists construct their computer models that attempt to forecast what the temperatures are going to be like in the years to come, they have to pick which which inputs to put into their model, into their simulation. And there are simply too many. It's too chaotic a system. And that's why their predictions have always been wrong. Kieran is saying, if we could make nukes with plastic, pollution wouldn't be a thing. I know that much. Oh, man. I don't know if any of you guys are Canadian, but in Canada, I grew up in New Jersey for the first New York and then New Jersey up until I was in grade 4. So up until I was 9 years old, probably around 10, I was a total thwacka. And we moved to Canada, and it was unreal because in New Jersey, you get a jug of milk. You get a gallon jug of milk. Had a little like a cardboard piece of you put it over the top, and that was it. No screw top, no nothing, just this little cardboard piece of whatever. But then we moved to Canada, and milk here is sold by, I think it's 4 liters. And they take the 4 liters, and it's about 1.3 liters are put into 3 individual sealed plastic bags, which you then insert into a jug, and you snip, and you cut, and you make a little hole, and then you pour your milk out of the jug, and then you replace the bag. And so it's 3 plastic bags And those 3 plastic bags are then put into another plastic bag. I sometimes will go to the corner store to buy milk because we've run out, and I'll have, I have a bag holding 3 plastic bags, and the girl or the guy will say to me, "Do you want a bag for your milk?" And I'm like, "I've got 3 plastic bags in a plastic bag. Do I need another bag to carry it?" No, I'm good. But now, of course, we can't have plastic bags. I mean, when I was a kid, the grocery stores all used paper bags, and we switched to plastic to save the environment. This is the insanity of it all. In 2020, there was a famous climatologist, a bunch of climatologists had published a study, and they predicted that within the coming years, they didn't give a specific number, but they said in the coming years, children will not know what snow is. And here we are in the year 2023, and there are kids this winter who have been tobogganing down in Galveston, Texas, in the snow belt. So what's going to happen with this, these UFOs over the US, over Canada? Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Goodness knows. But the bottom line is they're pushing this idea of smart cities. They're pushing this idea of a digital ID. They're pushing the idea of a cashless society. And if you haven't picked up a copy of 1984, it's worth the investment. Go to a used bookstore, pick one up, pay in cash. Don't pay with a card. Don't pay with your phone. Pay with hard currency, because everything's about surveillance. Everything is about surveillance in today's world. And they want us to be little more than digital property. So I've rambled on for 22 minutes now. I'm going to leave you there. Kieran, Dave, or Dav, thank you very much. I always enjoy when people engage with me. Thank you for the likes. It gives me my little dopamine rush. If you're not subscribed and you want to hit the bell, I think that's what people say. And we'll see what's coming. I didn't go down the COVID rabbit hole, but that was a fear-based operation. I don't see them driving fear right now over these UFOs, but I see the potential for it. They weren't driving fear in January and February of 2020 when they were reporting about COVID spreading widely in China. And I remember way back then, January, February, I was doing back of the napkin calculations and looking at the number of deaths against a population of 1.4 odd billion people. And I said, oh, there's nothing to worry about here. Queensland, Australia. And Kieran is saying he's had COVID. And I'm trying to talk with my Aussie accent. It's not very good. It's not bad. It's more East End London. But he's saying he had COVID and it wasn't a thing. I had it in February of 2022. And I can't say definitively that I had it because I'm probably one of the very few people who has actually never tested. I've never taken a single test for the bug. The grocery store offered me free testing kits. And I was like, pass. Although I should have taken one. They were free. I could have used it to test, water or Coke or whatever. Oh, Dab is from Sweden. God love your country. The one country that didn't go completely insane during COVID. That Sweden, as I understand it, as was reported, and maybe you can correct me, but my understanding is that Sweden kept their public schools open for what we call elementary age kids, probably up until 10, 11, 12 years of age. They closed down high schools and post-secondary, and they had them engage in distance learning. Bars and restaurants remained open. Their only qualifier was that people had to be seated, and they urged the elderly and the vulnerable to isolate as much as possible, but they didn't mandate it. They didn't have lockdowns. And from everything I've read, you know, comparable, Sweden's 10 million, give or take. And Belgium is another country of about 10 million, so very similar in size. And Belgium had worse outcomes than Sweden, despite bringing in strict, harsh measures. You know, but at the end of the day, you can play around with numbers, you can play around with data, and everyone, everyone who was all in, and oh, we got to shut down. They said, look at Denmark. Sweden's doing so much worse than Denmark. Yeah, well, how come they're doing? It's all crazy. And Dad was saying, yes, everything was open. We didn't actually feel the crisis. Yeah, and that's where I talk about being a psychological operation. I'm convinced that in the Western world, that the primary driver behind locking down, isolating, closing businesses, all these measures, all it was designed to do was to build buy-in for getting people to willingly roll up their sleeves. But I don't know if you guys are going to watch the Super Bowl tomorrow or not. I am not. I do not have television, and I think that's a big reason why it's easier to filter through things, is when you don't have the drama and the panic porn of the nightly news. In Canada, I was in the military at the time when COVID started, the Canadian military, and I was working at a radar station, and we had a TV that would be up, and it had to, during daytime business type hours, like from 8 to 4, it had to be on current affairs or news programming. And I heard the reporting, and I would just roll my eyes, because it was always bum, 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 bum. Terrifying news from Bobcaygeon, Ontario, as the tsunami of death continues to ravage the Pinecrest nursing home, with another 8 people succumbing to the deadly coronavirus. And I just, at work, I was like, oh, please, just report the numbers, just report the facts. I don't need the drama. 8 people in a nursing home died. What a shock. People die in nursing homes every day. It's God's waiting room. It's where people go when they're old, sick, and dying, when their life battery is down to its last 2%. Anyway, yesterday when I did my video, I wore my Green Bay Packer shirt, because when I used to pay attention to football, that was my team, and a friend gave me the shirt. I'd never buy one. This one I actually paid for, and I donated. It was at a rally in Peterborough, Ontario, in April of 2021, back when I was still in the Army. And enough is enough. Open up small business now, because back then they were still closed. So anyway, Dab, Kieran, thank you very much for chiming in. If you haven't, if you don't mind subscribing, that'd be awesome. Love to chat with you guys again, and we'll see what happens with this UFO story. I'm 50-50. I can't decide. I'm gonna just keep an eye, and I kind of got when the monkeypox story came out, I thought, okay, I really thought that was going to blow up into something, and it ended up fading into background noise. So now I'm a little more cautious, a little more circumspect, and let's wait and see. But anyway, we'll soldier on. God bless everyone, and thanks for watching. And I wish I was living in Sweden, but I don't speak Swedish. Amen, Kieran.